members have any
Oh,
other
was that, and
questions?
the dollar amount on that then? For that, I guess that you could use the rounding of, you figure about 100,000 for each person, but that's not really the base, because you're talking about 3%.
What I determined, estimated, 3% plus the mandatory benefits, which are FICA, retirement, unemployment, and L&I. The out-of-pocket cost to the district for the 3% COLA, just for certificated instructional staff, is $520,000.
Now, why have you figured in the benefits on that? Because that,
Not permissive, which is like healthcare and life, but for every salary the employer, North Shore, pays FICA, 7.65%, retirement, which is over 13% next year, and then a little bit of L&I and a little bit of unemployment. So every dollar you spend in salary, you are mandated to spend about 22% more in those mandatory employer costs.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions on any other consent agenda items? Board members can rejoin the meeting. It will refresh the order and allow you to vote. Okay, seeing no further questions, we'll call for a vote.
Was mine refreshed? Yeah.
And that does pass unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the second reading and approval of resolution number 725, the 2015-16 budget adoption. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Is there any additional discussion on this item?
For the future, just a request / recommendation, I did dig out from the study session this expenditure breakdown that you referenced in the discussion. I think it would be helpful to understand the deltas in there. If we can include that in the future, I think that would be great.
In the agenda item.
Exactly, the
Yeah.
summary itself, because it does such a good job explaining where the delta's going.
Which would naturally put it on the website, because I think that's the problem, it's not on the website, right? Okay, that would be my suggestion. Is that it? I did have some questions on the budget. I have to find them. One of my questions was answered. It was about MSOCs, and so that is going to additional staff.
Not all of it, but a large share of it, yes.
In the, I think you read off the list. Did you say that 5.4 million out of that list? Because I don't have that list here. 5.4 million was added staff. Is that what I heard you say?
No, that was program enhancements, program and staffing enhancements, the 4 or 5 page document that was part of the study session, and also the June 23rd study session. And I believe I have one additional copy if you want me to.
Well, that was that 5.4 million. Then you ran through, when you were reading off that list, I had to quit writing. I wasn't that quick. You were talking about additional staff in different places.
Yes, would you like me to grab?
It looks like somebody did. Brenda did. That's awesome. Thank you. I remember that. So program enhancement, see attached list. It's not there, but that was a 4-page.
Yep.
So, in light of the question asked by the group of people that were in here earlier, but first of all, I certainly won't call it a windfall. I don't consider it that in any way, shape, or form. But where would that 2 million be moved to? Did you actually just say good, or how did we utilize that? Is that found in this list?
Well, I have to disagree with their calculations.
Okay.
Originally, when we first provided the 3-year budget projection, it was after Governor Inslee had prepared his statewide budget. He was giving a 3% COLA at that time. We took the conservative stance that the state would provide Initiative 732, restore Initiative 732 funding to the amount of 1.8%. We weren't banking on the additional. So the difference between providing the district 1.8% across the board and providing 3% across the board, since we had to fund less of NSCA than, we had planned the state funding 1.8 and the district funding 1.2. Then when the state said we're funding the full 3, we said, okay, that frees up money, but all the other staff is now also getting a 3% that when we had been planning on a 1.8%. So that differential between the 1.8 and the 3% was actually about $500,000 to the district. On June 23rd, when we published that program staffing enhancement that I just gave a copy of, we held off on $770,000 worth of items. When the state funded the 3% instead of the 1.8, that freed up the 500 and we were able to balance the entire 5.4 program list. So to us, we, since we started in January planning on providing a 3% COLA per the contract, the differential was 500,000 and we went further down the program staffing enhancement list with the available resources.
Okay. And I did have a question then. I'm a little puzzled about the 75 million in June for capital projects versus 145 million. And did you say that there was a detailed list of or some kind of list that said what that was going to be spent on? I wasn't sure I heard the answer correctly.
The capital facilities plan, the 75 million, only refers to bond expenditures versus the capital projects fund budget is a snapshot of their whole entire project-based budget, all available sources of revenues, which is the bonds, the unassigned balance, and the tech levy. So OSPI does not require us to detail those out, but certainly we can provide additional details at the board's request. It's just not.
So in June, the 75 million that you presented and talked about to the board,
It's just bonds.
it's just bonds, and so that increased to 145 million wasn't suddenly money started flowing like crazy and we had a whole lot more money. And we're saying, oh yes, feel free, go spend. What you're saying then is that that's the rest of the program that wasn't outlined in the June presentation?
Karen, I see, is coming up to
That's
help
awesome.
me.
I thought you'd done very well explaining that, but at least I have it in my mind, but I might not have it right, so that's great.
No, I'm just gonna.
Can you clarify what you mean by June presentation? I want to make sure we're talking about the same June numbers.
Facilities plan.
Capital facilities plan or something Lydia presented?
No, I think it was the capital
Okay.
facilities.
Okay, yes, then, correct. That plan requires as a component, we're required to write that plan to meet all the jurisdictions' requirements of having a comprehensive plan for their jurisdiction. It includes a lot of required elements that we have to provide in that plan, one of which is a spending plan for the issues talked about in it. So we only list bond dollars. It's a really rough estimate. The budget is a sort of maximum, we're requesting maximum authority for spending for everything that we have going on right now, North Creek High School, Woodinville Phase 3, all the other bond projects, as well as what we're anticipating needing to do potentially in this year, such as purchasing property or any other projects that we may need to deal with that are unexpected. So we do request the budget authority to ensure that we can cover all our needs. It's not a guarantee that we're going to spend $145 million in the next fiscal year.
I think the land acquisition is the best example. That is not a bond expenditure, planned bond expenditure. It is the unassigned fund balance. And we hope to achieve land acquisition purchases, but no guarantee that through negotiations that we'll find a suitable piece of property that's in our price range, but we need the max expenditure authority so that if we are successful in that endeavor, that we can make that purchase at that time. But if the land isn't there, or the price isn't right, or the sellers, you might not spend that. But it's all available resources and all potential expenditures for those projects, with North Creek being the largest of those projects.
Yeah, that was much clearer about what was going on, and I believe I would like to see what you offered, a more detailed list of what we're spending it on.
Sure. I'll be glad to get you a detailed list. I can tell you right off the top of my head that most of it is for North Creek High School and Woodinville Phase 3, which are already underway. For North Creek, because the spending has just recently ramped up based on its construction schedule, we know that a lot of those bills are going to start to hit us in the next fiscal year, as well as all the other summer projects that we have going that won't be closing out until the next fiscal year.
Is any of that for the primary center that we were going to? Okay, so that's not, the primary center wasn't part of the capital project.
Oh, yes, I would
Yes.
like that.
Sure.
That would be a good thing to have. And what you're saying, though, is bottom line, you're asking for capacity.
That's correct.
You're not necessarily going to spend that.
That's correct. And you,
Okay.
and we, as you know, bring the projects to you for approval.
And so, when I look at Lydia's and the way it works, and when I look at yours and the way it works, there's a big difference, and it always catches me, and okay, why is this? And I appreciate that, thank you.
Board members have any other questions?
Recently, there's been, I've been contacted with an interesting question, and it was about an insurance deductible for $1,000 for Shelton View slides, and it was passed on to the building fund by central office, and the principal subsequently asked the PTA to backfill that $1,000 of insurance deductible for slides. Well, PTA is a 501c3 and doesn't really have that in their charter. It's not part of their mission to pay for district insurance deductibles, I would think, but it's an interesting question of how, when we do a budget, why did that go that way? Why isn't the district responsible for insurance deductibles on anything in our building?
So the district pays the insurance premium centrally, and the premium that, or the package that we elect is, the first 1,000 is covered by the district. And for accountability purposes, historically, we have, if it occurs at this site, that is the site that pays for the 1,000 deductible, but that's the max out of pocket that any location would have to pay. And it's just an accountability principle in the sense that if you're responsible for it, perhaps you'll be more careful. And I recognize that Shelton View was out of everybody's control, but it's also out of the central district office control as well. It's just the same as your car deductible. If you, are in the unfortunate accident that even though you pay a premium, that's the out-of-pocket cost you'll have to pay. So they're capped at 1,000, but to make it fair, that's how we've treated all the schools. We could certainly reconsider that. I do believe there would be some pushback from schools who have paid that deductible in the past, and why are you changing it now? So it's reviewable, but I can see pros and cons on both sides.
Are you saying that you will review that?
If you would like me to, we
I'm
could.
just one of 5.
You're just one of 5.
I would agree.
I think it's something that you should review. I mean, Shelton View had no way of
Sure.
controlling people coming in and setting off
Sure.
fireworks on their slides.
The difficulty is central office doesn't have available resources to pay those deductibles. So my fear is that in order to carve out those deductibles for future incidences, then perhaps where would that come from? So that's kind of the trade-off.
That would be figured into a budget. Do a budget for that.
Good.
Well, I definitely, those kind of questions have come up, and, they certainly make sense to me on that. So I'm,
Could I just
Yeah.
ask a clarifying question? Is your concern that PTA funded it and not the building budget? Because we can
Both.
okay.
it was
We
both,
can
no,
investigate that.
it was the building as well.
Okay.
Very much it's my concern that PTA is paying for a number of things that I don't think are PTA's.
So I think your concern is that they were asked.
They were
And
asked,
I'll just
yes.
investigate.
And, the water is another example of that. I mean, there's just things that PTAs, I don't see why PTAs are being asked to pay those things, in addition to reams of paper.
I think to piggyback on that, the issue to me is, as you're talking about this, is that it takes away from the good things that the PTAs are trying to do to help kids. And, like in the instance of Shelton View, they have just X amount of dollars that might be inequitable for one school that doesn't raise as much in their PTA, and then they have an incident or an accident, and now they're being asked to pay, which could be inequitable to other schools. And so, how much out of that, but their budget is that, and then is that taking away from the students they're serving?
I'll investigate.
And just to clarify, the school, we assume that the school building budget will pay for that $1,000. We have no knowledge that people are asking their PTAs.
Yeah. A good thing to, I think, look at.
Okay. Some of the priorities that, I have fought for on this, or voted against, voted with through the years, I'm not seeing in this budget. One of the things going back as far as, goodness, 7 or 8 years ago, was the change in nursing schedules from 8 to 7.5 hours. I heard about that again tonight. I'd like to know why it's still a staffing priority for us to do 7.5 hours instead of 8. Is there a way to answer that question? Without violating any negotiations. If that's not okay, then I understand that, but
I'm sorry, The question is why they're not 8 hours?
Well, why haven't we returned to 8 hours? That was a budget cut a number of years
Actually,
ago.
It was a
Their workday has long been 7.5 hours and has never been 8 hours. There were cuts to nursing staffing several years ago that involved consolidating a few of the smaller schools so that they shared a registered nurse. There's a fairly long bargaining history around the nurse workday, and students are there 6.5 hours span. The nurses work 7.5 hours, and they actually bank some of those hours. And many of the nurses work 7 hours and bank a half an hour a day for meetings and other things. It is a topic that we're looking at. I know Doug's been looking at that, especially at the large schools, to make sure there's adequate nurse staffing. We're aware of the issue, and we're working on possible solutions to it.
I remember taking a vote to cut nurse schedules by 30 minutes. That was in budgets, cutting season. And I remember that vote because I voted no on it.
There are some nurses at small schools that like to
Oh, yeah.
but
So
not their workday.
there were two ways we address nurse staffing at large schools, or small schools, excuse me. One was we did a needs assessment of several of the small schools to determine which ones could actually share nurses and still meet the service needs. We had also had a model that permitted fewer than 7.5 hours of staffing at some of the smaller schools, but still retain a single nurse at the school that didn't have to travel. I don't think there's very many of those left on. And that was actually, because there used to be a 7.5 hour guarantee in the contract. And when we were doing all these cuts, we did have an agreement to permit some of the schools to have less than 7.5 hours. But there was never an across-the-board cut to nursing hours. It was very targeted and specific to the size of the school and the needs of the students at those schools. Things like the special ed population, free and reduced lunch, mobility of the students at the school, all those things went into looking at those needs.
That explains that. Thank you very much. Does this budget, I see in this, thank you very much, that you do have some transportation dollars going to the shuttle, but that's for next year. Do you have additional transportation money going to a later start time?
So far, that is the plan for 15-16 later start opportunities is the shuttles. So any future items would be in ensuing budgets.
16, 17.
16, 17, or 17, 18, according to the study.
And, you know, the reason I voted against this budget last year, or the budget last year, not this budget, was because of the half-day early release. Are we making any changes to that?
The 95 minutes a week, no.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and that was my final question for this topic.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question, or maybe it's more of a statement. So I know that we had the increase in the materials and supplies this year, and we saw the breakdown of where that money is going. And since then, there's been a lot of citizen comment on the different things that we're buying for schools, like the reams of paper. And, you know, being a parent in the school district, and especially at the elementary school, I think that they have more supplies that they probably buy. And you know, a lot of people questioning, I know our citizens are questioning, if we're getting this increase in the MSOC, you know, why aren't we able to cover some of these things like copy paper? Because the school district can buy it at cost, or not at cost, but at a lower cost because you're buying in bulk versus each parent having to go out and buy, you know, hand sanitizer, copy paper, and the burden that puts on families that might have may have one kid or 2 or 3 kids in an elementary. I'd like to see that next year, that we move towards trying to cover some of these basic costs and finding a way in our budget to first try to cover the things that are for the specific school, not maybe the markers and the personal things, and then as the years go, that we keep trying to take more of a chunk of that, because I do think it's an undue burden on our family and doesn't provide equity for all families. And is there a reason why we couldn't find a way to provide copy paper to our schools, kind of those basic supplies?
And the nice thing is next year for the next budget, am I sharing any secrets? We have a study session in early February to discuss the board's goals and priorities for the 16-17 budget. So that would be a fantastic time to have that conversation.
Note that in case I forget that.
So I think the point is well taken. I think that some of this is just historical practice of schools, whether it's the box of Kleenex that evolved into the ream of paper. I mean, I think some of it's a little bit like the water at some of the schools where the PTA offered to pick that up at one period of time, and then it just sort of became an annual thing that PTA did, whether they wanted to continue doing it or not. But I think the point's well taken, and it's something we should certainly explore with our principals who establish those supply lists for each of their schools, to really ask them to be thoughtful about what they are asking. Are they basic supplies that, particularly as we've increased their per student allocation, they should be looking to pick up on their own, and certainly to be thinking about and talking with their PTAs and with other parent groups about the equity impacts of some of those supply list requests.
Thank you. I did see when I looked at the supply list, because I was looking for Gianna, that it was kind of across the board on that kind of copy paper. It didn't seem like it was one particular school. So, which brings me to the bigger question of kind of something Ken brought up. In fact, 2 things is, one, the community-based budgeting, making sure that people, our community is, I think that's what Ken was talking about, but having the community have a voice of what some of their priorities are, so the board's priorities. And I don't know if in this next budget cycle, there's a way to be able to have the community's voice as part of it. I know I did look at Portland Public Schools, and they do have something like that where they get input from their community, which is along the lines of what we're all trying to do, is get the input and voice in our diversity training and who our stakeholders are. And this isn't really directed at you, Lydia, except it's more as our board and our staff. Also the Portland Public Schools, and I really like this, they have a Portland, let me get to it really quick. It's a community oversight, and it's an accountability, the Citizens Bond Accountability Committee, that they started when they went for their 2012 bond. And back to what we're saying, where is this money going? And I know we've explained it, but they have stakeholders that are involved. They have 3 board members, and they have a board member of 8, but they have 3 board members on this accountability committee, and they have people that have relevant experience from the community. Might be in construction, might be in legal, and they form this accountability group, and I can send the link to everybody because I think it's really would be great if we could all take a look at this for the next time we're talking about this in the budget. And they provide real detailed accountability for each building and each project, and they label it with green, yellow, red, how are we doing on all these different sub areas. They have like goals that they're trying to meet, outcomes for how they're using the money. And then that's,
Is that similar to the capital bonds planning task force that we have? We have similar in that we bring the community in at the beginning of it to plan the projects. So is that
But it's
kind of
it's
what?
on, yeah, but it's ongoing throughout the whole process. So they meet regularly to see where are they spending it? Are they on target? Which I know you give us some of that information. But also they look at every single school, any facilities improvement that they're doing at every single school. And they look at, and you guys can take a look at it, so I'm not taking up exorbitant amount of times to explain it. But I think it would be something.
So we do have that. I mean, we have the facilities, and Ryan and Karen can explain it a little bit more, but annually, isn't it annually, we go through a pretty detailed process of looking at the buildings and rating their needs and through a point system that Ryan or Karen can want to come
One
up with.
more thing, and then I'm happy to hear that. But I think it's a little bit different, which is why I want to send you out, is it has performance measures. So yes, we rate them, but this is a performance measure on how are we doing spending that money on these different projects. And it has these different performance measures under that keep accountability to using the money for the tax holders. And specifically to be able to show the tax holders, here's how we're using the money, here's our accountability. So I think we rate buildings, but now we're talking about accountability with the money. That's transparent to the community. But if I'm wrong, or if there's something I'm missing.
I believe what she's saying, though, is not just capital projects. It's an accountability group that is looking at the budget as well, so.
And they
Both
meet on
operating and
a
capital.
quarterly basis and provide these reports.
Did you want me to explain that?
Yeah, I mean, if there's something.
Right, so OSPI actually requires that we do a review of all of our buildings. You've seen that report. In addition, every 4 years, we do a much deeper one in advance of the Capital Bond Planning Task Force. The Bond Planning Task Force looks at all of that information and determines what to include or recommend to you to include in the next bond. In terms of reporting back to the community or accountability, I believe there's a piece that gets put together called Promises Made, Promises Kept. Which includes, and she can probably speak to that a little better, but it includes a chart of what those things were during the prior bond cycle and where we're at with them, which ones have been done, which ones haven't, and sort of a report, I guess, if you will, of what we promised our community and what we delivered.
And I believe that's published in the community magazine that goes out to all of our stakeholders as well. I mean, I've seen it in there, yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to send this out to you guys because I think you hit some of it, or I think we're doing some of it, but there's other pieces that I think we can learn from on how this is broken down and how there are many different members to this. And it's kind of an internal auditing system and accountability system. So I'll just send it, and then if everyone would look at it for.
I do have another question, I'm sorry, because that reminded me, on the internal auditor options, has North Shore ever used an outside auditor to come in? And other than the state, have we had any outside auditor come in, external contractor, come in and look at our processes?
One time we were required for our health benefits program, but not for the general fund or any other regular funds of the district.
If other districts are doing this, so I heard Mr. Smith say that Seattle had 4. Are
that
other
was the
districts?
City of Seattle.
City.
Oh, City of Seattle, okay, so are any other districts in the state doing this?
School district has one.
Not that I'm aware of.
Why not? It sounds sensible. So
Um,
why do school districts not do it?
School district accounting, for one, it's very rare to have a local government that only has 5 funds. Cities and counties can have 200-300 individual funds, including fire, You know, every activity they do, they're required to have their own fund. We have a lot more simplicity in the counting world with OSPI. So each county does not look like another county or city to city, but there is a lot of comparison and quite a bit of streamlining in accounting with the manual that the state auditors and OSPI jointly produce. So in some respects, some of the accounting is much simpler. And then it just comes down to prioritization of resources, and we, you know, strive to be efficient and lean and keep the money in the classroom. That's just been our goal.
I think I would like, I don't feel like making a motion at this point because I haven't heard enough about it from the district and from my fellow board members about whether or not they think this would be a good idea. But I think when it comes time, I would like to add that as a topic to our discussions.
For future budget,
Yes.
so maybe
I
the
would.
February, is that what you're talking about? The February meeting where you were talking about allocations for the next
I'm
year?
talking about us having a conversation about whether or not we think that would be a good idea for the district.
Do you have an internal audit or external?
So are we talking about hiring an outside auditor to come in or adding headcount?
It's hiring an outside auditor, someone who isn't, someone who isn't held to the district, but does a direct report probably to the board.
And so how would that be different
Auditing.
than the state audit, which we are required to do every year?
Because it would be an external auditor that would maybe catch that before the state gives us a finding or anything.
The district has had very clean audits, and we've actually provided personnel to other districts because our processes have been, are modeled in other districts now because of the work that our people have done.
So are we having that discussion now as opposed to adding it as an agenda item?
The part I'm not understanding is that we're approving the budget tonight, which has
Yes.
allocations and
Right.
resources assigned. So help me understand how that would, prior to next year's budget discussions, how that would work for a budget that we're approving tonight.
Well, I think that you could probably find that money, but if you prioritized it as a board, I don't think there would be a problem finding that in the budget. But if you didn't, then it would be a good topic for the next year as well. Are we having that discussion now instead of adding it?
No, we're clarifying when that would come in the process and what the goal is for that.
It's, have a discussion about it. It's that simple. I'd like to hear from the other board members about that. I'd like them to give some thought to it before they started talking about it or blocking it.
And in the meantime, I think to add, we could look at some of the other school districts that have that, correct? Wasn't there other school districts that
Not to Lydia's knowledge.
have it?
Not that she knows.
Oh.
I think, well, I
thought
heard
you
him
just
say
said-
Seattle, but it was city of Seattle.
Oh,
They corrected
city.
me.
I see.
The city government has
Okay.
it. Okay,
Well, I'm not prepared to have a conversation about this tonight.
right.
So I.
That's what she's
That's
saying.
what I
Future
said.
agenda
Well,
item.
it's,
Well,
yeah,
that's
so
what
I'm
I'm
getting
saying.
confused if we're having
Right.
a conversation
Thank
or
you.
not
So
having a
that-
conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the agenda item before us, which has been moved and seconded, is approval of the budget resolution number 725 for budget adoption. Is there any further discussion or any questions on that item?
Well, I am going to be voting no again, once again, for the half days, the 95 minutes of early release that I know are making the community unhappy. And also for this item on MSOCs. And I can tell you that a few years back, I had education advocates talking sincerely and arguing with me about MSOCs and transportation funding. And they said, what would you rather have funded, Dawn? And I said, I would rather have basic ed funded. And we went round and round, and the phrase was used to me. George said, but Dawn, that's not sexy. We can't push for it down at Olympia as well as we can push for many other things. And I said, it's immaterial because that's where we're backfilling a lot. So it's very disappointing to see MSOCs not being funded as MSOCs, and instead that's still being laid on the backs of our parents through copy paper and tissues and everything else, water, everything.
And just to clarify that we have far exceeded available funding in what we do fund in MSOCs, and this restoration of MSOCs frees up local levy funds for other needs, is part of the issue.
You far exceeded what?
We have been spending more on MSOCs for many years than the state has been funding. And by funding what we're already paying for, then that frees up our local levy to pay for some of the program enhancements we need.
I've been buying copy paper for years too.
We do.
So I would say that's a big reason I'm voting no on it as well.
Building budgets were enhanced as part of this, though, some,
Yes.
yeah.
Fully aware of that.
I just want to, I like what Larry said, that we're used to certain things and, you know, being able to think outside the box and relook at some things that we're seeing as normal and recognizing that maybe they aren't. So I think these are really good discussions to
And I think
not always get used to everything and be able to think outside of what we're doing, and, you know, as a district in general.
For sure, and I would be very surprised if office staff in the buildings got, because we haven't approved the budget yet, got the wherewithal to catch up on the fact they're getting extra building dollars so they can change their supply list before they had to give them to parents. So I think there's a timing issue that we're caught in on this issue as well. Because officially, we haven't approved the money. So if they're gonna change their supply list, since offices are not really open and opened right now in a fully staffed way, they wouldn't have a way to change the supply list for this fall. I think it's a little.
I would think that they would know that MSOCs are being funded, and
I don't
if
know.
they don't, then they should be informed of that.
We don't distribute department and building budgets until after the board has adopted the budget. So they have not received their new allocations for 15-16.
I believe I remember getting the school supply list with the end of year
You do.
report card.
Yep.
Yeah. So I just wanted to thank you. I know we've, as a board, have talked a lot about concerns with the treatment opportunity gap, and there's certainly a lot of evidence in this budget of work towards that, ELL. And I'm particularly delighted with the natural leader district level. So that's great, and pleased that that's part of the budget, so thank you.
On that note, I would really like to thank you for the additional information this year. This is a much better budget picture than we've ever had. It's great.
All right, seeing no further questions, we'll call for a vote. And that does pass 4-1. And again, thank you, Lydia, and others for all of the information that you provided to us. Next item on the agenda is the second reading of Board Policy number 9270, closure of facilities. Is there a motion to approve? So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on this item?
Thanks again for the clarification.
All right, seeing none, we'll call for a vote. And that does pass unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the item that we pulled up from the consent agenda, the 2015-16 revised board meeting schedule. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And discussion on this item.
Which one is the Wednesday?
It's June 15th.
It's June 15th.
It's the next day.
Is
Once
that
again, I just reiterate the reason I'm voting no on this, or hoping actually that we change this to an open day for future board to determine what meets their schedule better.
So is it because graduation got moved to that Tuesday?
Correct. So, yes, and there was information in the briefing recently about the scheduling of Comcast Arena, and the 14th seemed to be the most agreeable date. And moving the meeting to Wednesday, the 15th, was simply following the existing board policy, which I guess the most applicable example would be if Veterans Day falls on a Tuesday, by board policy, the holiday, the board meeting moves to the next calendar day. And so that's simply the logic that we applied in rescheduling this date, although it's not a national holiday, it's graduation.
Could we just put an asterisk by it for now, and then in December, when the new board members are on, we'll just have a quick conversation
There-
of,
Sure, there's certainly no reason why it couldn't be reviewed
Right.
later on. None that I can think of that would, it could be on the Monday, it could be on the Thursday. It could be canceled altogether.
That's what I was thinking. I really was, because I work Wednesdays, and
well, and that's
I'm,
fine. If we just put it asterisk by it.
yeah, and so every time
we'll
it's a
have
Wednesday, it becomes a burden on my schedule, so, so for me, you know, I prefer it not, then I was like, why do we even have to have this day, you know?
Keep in mind how much there is going on at that time of the year, so it's, to have an entire month between board meetings would be challenging to get the business of the district done.
Oh, it's because it's a board meeting, I see what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah,
And it does
I
get
do-
published on the calendar, so if there is gonna be an asterisk
Not
on
just
it,
a
it would need to be
study
on an asterisk so that the public is notified well in advance as
we
well.
could always have
so-
3 meetings in 1 month too, couldn't we, potentially? Like on a Tuesday,
On the 5th Tuesday of the month instead, you mean? Our
Yeah,
board
the purpose
policy,
is for
number
that.
1400, dictates, under our current policy, how and when we hold meetings, and it's the second Tuesday of each month at 4 and the fourth Tuesday at 7.
but the Wednesday deviates from that, so.
Yeah, it does say
We could always
if
have
regular
the
meetings
third.
are, it says, let's see, or at other times in places as determined by the presiding officer or by majority vote of the board. And then, as Larry mentioned, it does put in the policy what happens when a holiday falls on a Tuesday and it goes to the next immediate day.
How are Mondays for you? Would it be better to start with a Monday with the asterisk, if that's a more reasonable day for you, and then as we get closer, evaluate? If you know for sure Wednesday's out, would Monday be better?
I'd just like to reiterate, I think TBD would not be a horrible thing to have on there and
I
just
agree.
decide it after the new board has been elected.
Because we don't know what other people's work schedules are
Okay.
potentially that are coming on the board, and so we need to have a quorum, even if I personally can't be there, we need to make sure there's 3 of us there.
So I'm going to make a suggestion that I hadn't noticed before. So if you look at the May dates, May 24th, the way the calendar falls, there's actually then 3 weeks between May 24th and June 15th. And so I might suggest that we instead look at June 7th. That would keep the board meeting on a Tuesday. It would be 2 weeks removed from the May 24th meeting, 3 weeks removed from the June 28th meeting. So we would simply be shifting the 3-week gap between board meetings from May 24th to June 15th to June 8th to June 7th, excuse me, to June 28th.
I think that makes the most sense.
And
That it just stays on the same day.
I probably should have looked at the calendar in more detail and noticed that prior to this point, but I think that might be a better solution.
I think that keeping it on a Tuesday is at least consistent with
There would still
what
be
we do.
two weeks between board meetings, which is standard.
That's fine with me, I would vote yes for that.
So
That's a good idea.
we entertain a friendly, we will change the schedule accordingly to note the date as June 7th, consistent with Tuesdays, if that's agreeable to the board.
It's a great.
The board policy probably needs to be updated then to reflect that as well. Because it does say regular meetings shall be held at 4 p.m. on the second Tuesday of each month.
This isn't a holiday though, so I think we're deviating from it either way.
We'll make sure and note, especially in the schedule and on the schedule, that this is a day that falls out of the board policy sequence.
And the calendar as well, too.
If it's still timely to enter into the calendar, I'm not sure where we're at.
I have to have all the changes to the printer tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So we will get
Look at
So-
that.
Closure on this issue tonight would be helpful.
And it's possible to note that it's an anomaly, that it is not the regularly scheduled one. Is that acceptable to board members?
Yes.
Idea.
I like it also not being in the middle of that crazy week.
It's a tough time here.
All right, so we will be voting on this as revised with the June 7th meeting. Seeing no further discussion on this, we'll call for a vote. All right, and that does pass unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the district budget status report for June. Do board members have any questions on this item?
I wore you out on the last one, I'll just leave this one alone.
All right, seeing none, we'll go to the next agenda item, which is board reports and communications, future agenda items.
Yes, still, I would like the board to discuss an external auditor.
I would like to discuss after everyone takes a look at the Portland accountability information, that we discuss that bond accountability when you have time to look through it, and I'll send the link to Cindy. There's like a PowerPoint that kind of details it, and see if how much we are doing the same and how much we might be doing it differently.
All right.
That too.
And I may be the only one that is too dense to figure out the new SBA scoring system, but I'm a little worried the vertical alignment thing may be a challenge for some of our parents, that if their child gets a 2,500 in the 4th grade and a 2,500 in the 5th grade, that is not not even maintaining, it's actually going down. So, I don't know if other board members, that all makes sense to them and that resonates, great, but if I'm the only one that I'm concerned that that's not going to, I would like more understanding of how we're going to communicate that to our families, of what vertical alignment scoring means, so that we can be effective communicators on how that works.
Because even as a parent, I'm going, well, how does this score relate to, I mean, I get there's the levels, but I still don't get how the score relates to a bigger picture. It's not a lot of information as a parent.
Yeah.
So am I hearing you correctly that you're looking for more information on how the district is planning to communicate that?
Well, how they're going to communicate it, and certainly help
How
on my
we're-
part,
Okay.
understanding exactly what vertical alignment means. That's not something I'm familiar with. And again, if I'm the only one that doesn't get vertical alignment scoring, that's fine, but that's a new concept for me in the testing world, so.
I see that there's staff's nodding a lot, and were you planning on discussing that with us at a study session already? Or is that just, yeah, golly, that vertical alignment is a tough thing?
I'm sure Brandon will be covering it in his assessment session at the end of October, but there's a lot that we will need to be communicating differently. It's a whole different assessment, it's a whole new set of standards. So duly noted that the vertical scale scoring of this assessment, which is different from the grade level specific scoring of the previous assessment, where a 410 in the 3rd grade and a 410 in 4th grade were comparable results based on those grade standards, whereas now the vertical scale, students should progress to higher levels on the same scale with each grade level. So there's a lot we'll need to be communicating about this test, and sure, and put some energies into that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't break it down by percentile, and I don't know if that's,
It's a criterion reference test, not a norm reference test.
okay.
3 words.
Well,
that
that's
make
good
sense
information
separately.
right there.
The WASL and MSP have all been criterion reference tests as well.
That I wasn't involved in. It's all new to me, get it.
All right, thank you, board members. Next item on the end,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
are you on future agenda items still, or does that work?
I
I was going to move on, so if you have something, then.
I had a question, and it really hasn't fit anywhere, but the question is, when are high school students receiving their schedules? Is it before the first day of school?
I'd have to check to see which schedules, which grade level, is there a specific grade level you're referring to?
I have just heard that high school students are receiving their schedules on September 2nd instead of before school or on the first day of school.
So a typical practice would be all of our sophomores and our 7th graders who are involved in the orientation program of Lincoln Web receive their schedules on September 2nd. That would be a typical practice we've done for years. The juniors and seniors usually receive them on their back-to-school days, which is probably a week before school starts.
And so they're doing their link thing, those,
On September 2nd would be
On
the
that day.
high school and web for 7th graders, yes.
okay.
And that's a typical practice.
Okay, then it must have been that question was being asked by a sophomore.
Yeah, so
Parents.
that they will receive them on their link day, which is September 2nd, and that would be practicing through all high schools, has been that way for years. Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right. Let's move to the next agenda item, which is board reports, and we will start with Dawn.
Attended the thing this morning, and that's it, I believe. If I attended other things, can't for the life of me remember them. Oh, went to my committee meeting in July.
Legislative.
Went to my committee meeting in June as well. Or no, did I? You know, I went to my committee meeting for sure in July.
And for Cindy's notes, that's in the ledge committee.
Yeah, legislative